So today is Sunday the 18th of April, and if you're watching this, well, you are here to hear the more in-depth explanation about each clock in my collection. So this is going to be a long ride, so be prepared. We'll start with this. This is a 1920s New Haven short drop. I estimate that it's 1920s due to the styling on the face. It has very geometric numerals, and the dial is octagonal. It isn't just a circular dial with an octagonal surrounding. The actual dial itself is also octagonal with the dial surrounding. This one opens up like so. And then there's a little clip back behind the case that locks this into place. And this door here comes open to reveal the directions and a non-original pendulum. I really like the Art Deco numerals on this. Next to it is a little novelty short drop. This is an Arrow, as it is labeled at the front. Uses a German novelty movement, spring driven, runs about 30 hours. Doesn't keep proper time. Once you wind it up, it goes way too fast. Then once it's close to unwinding, it's completely way too slow. So, not reliable timekeepers, but they are fun little clocks to collect. This is an FMS Maute. FMS stands for Friedrich Maute Schwenningen. I'm sorry if my German pronunciation's a bit off. I'm trying my best. But the short term for this clock is either FMS or Maute, or FMS Maute, whichever you prefer. It's a box clock, I think is what this is termed, that was made probably in the 1920s. I looked at the movement. I don't know if the markings on the back of the movement are actually showing any dates, but I do have a video you can check out here of the clock when I opened it up a while back, so you can tell me if you happen to know. This is a 30-hour cuckoo clock of unknown make. There's no marking anywhere in the movement, anywhere on the case, nowhere. What's interesting is this is a very small cuckoo clock. This is my hand, and I don't have the biggest hands in the world. And it uses count wheel striking, so that's fairly interesting. Also, let me show you the cuckoo there. Here's the cuckoo. And this one actually uses wooden bellows. I do believe that is wood. There is no plastic there. Those are wooden tuned blocks. Or, not wooden bellows, oh my god. Wooden blocks. Yeah, it's midnight right now. My brain is not working. Directly next to it is the Schneider. Has a little animated deer here, and a little animated bunny. And of course, the cuckoo, which looks like a colored pencil. This one has a Regula movement in it. Also runs for 30 hours, and sometimes these movements like to sync up, and the pendulums like to be in sync for a minute to 30 seconds. So that's fun to watch sometimes. Very mesmerizing. This one belongs to my parents, but they were getting tired of keeping it upstairs and winding it up every day, so they just let me keep it down here so that I could get its runtime in. This is an Elgin wall clock. It plays Westminster chimes, and my little friend is hiding up there today. I said Elgin, but I think the correct pronunciation's Elgin, not Elgin, so I apologize for that if I ever keep mispronouncing Elgin. But yeah, overall, aside from some scuffs there, like at the top where that brass piece was knocked off at one point and it had to be glued back on, it's pretty good. This is a Helmut Kammerer passive striking cuckoo clock. It does one cuckoo every quarter of an hour. As you can see, it's actually preparing to do the cuckoo for this quarter. So you might hear that when I'm talking about the novelty clocks. It's a 30-hour weight-driven novelty clock. These pop up often. This is a Lux Pendulette. It's a little Pendulette cuckoo clock, novelty clock. And there's a little animated red bird there that bobs slightly. You might have seen there. The movement actually uses a very interesting adaptation of a duplex escapement, which you normally find in watches. So it's rather unusual to see a clock with a pendulum using a duplex escapement, which you would only find in watches normally. The movement that is in this is actually adaptable. Lux made it adaptable. There are holes in this movement, I do believe, where there would be other parts for different kinds of clocks. Someone I know actually has a little novelty mantle clock, I think, that has a pin palette lever escapement using a movement that is almost an identical construction to this one in terms of the plates. The plates just have different pivots. So yeah, very interesting. The Lux Clock Company was in Waterbury, Connecticut, I think. This right here is a J. Angstler Owl novelty clock. It has eyes here that wag back and forth with the pendulum. That needed quite a bit of oil. There was so much friction in these eyes, the joints, they were causing the clock to stop prematurely. So I had to get that a good bit of oil. And unfortunately the hour hand gear is actually broken, so the hour hand doesn't move, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't keep time anyway. Right below it is a completely unmarked, once again, novelty cuckoo clock. It's a German, that's for sure, because it says Germany there. But the movement is completely unmarked. No manufacturer label or anything. I think this one might be newer because it has a few black plastic parts. Like the pallets are really thick black plastic, and some of the gears are thick black plastic as well. And some of the rest of the gears are actually brass, it seems. And the plates are brass, and the spring is actually metal, so I don't know what's going on there. That's really interesting. This one's a bit hard to fit completely in frame without the ultra wide, because it's just so tall. But this is a Trend triple chime wall clock. Has a very typical American style dial. You usually find these dials on American clocks from Sly, Ridgway, Howard Miller, those types of companies. Trend is no exception. Trend is actually, in fact, a branch company of Sly. So it would make sense that they use a dial like this, with the Tempest Fugit bit at the top, and the spandrels and whatnot. It plays Whittington, St. Michael, Westminster, and of course you have your silent at the very top, but why would you do that? This one uses a Hermle. It's a 1051-030A. The case is American, but the movement is German. And what really bugs me is Trend or Sly or, even Howard Miller or Ridgway, they have to boast, oh, it was made in America. Well, okay, you borrowed from Germany as well. I mean, you got the German movement in there. Some of them, pay Hermle to stamp the movements and say that, oh, it was made by the Howard Miller Clock Company. So that makes people think the movement's actually American too. No, it's not a completely American clock. It's German-American. But, I don't know, that's just a small pet peeve that I have. Now, how about some true American clocks, huh? So, right here, this outstanding piece is a Seth Thomas OG clock with reverse glass painting. It says, let me turn on the flash, E pluribus unum, which is Latin for out of many one, and that is a popular US motto. The dial is a replacement, but what's interesting is this OG has an alarm. I don't usually see OG clocks that have an alarm. This is a 30-hour OG, so runs for 30 hours on a wind. I usually wind it up every day after school. This is a Sessions Beehive mantle clock. The Sessions Clock Company is from Forestville, Connecticut, United States of America. This one was probably made around 1910 or so, while this one was made in the 1860s or 1870s, circa that era. And overall, pretty okay condition. The finish is kind of alligatoring a little bit, or however this is called. It looks like scales. And you got this bit here at the top, and the finish is really dull at the top, but I really like it. I think the age adds character, even if it's unintentional. I like it. And this is an Ingram adamantine mantle clock. It's not actually a cast iron case or anything like that. It's just wood that's been painted black, and it has some brass add-ons here. This is wood that is painted to look like marble. I mean, they did a kind of good job. I really like the feet and these little, I don't think these are called handles, but I'll just call them additions to the side of the case. Very neat. This is a little Linden travel alarm. Let me show you how this 24-hour dial works. First, I'll explain how you actually set it up. So, say the time is 12:40, which it's about to be 12:40. Okay, 12:40 at midnight, so 12:40 a.m. that would be. So, find your time zone. For my case, I am in Central Daylight Time at the moment, so that would be Chicago for me. I would set the clock to 12:40, and then I would take this dial here, which you can move with this gear, and I would move it to where Chicago already is. See, you can move this around a bit. I move it to there, about there. There we go. And then once that your time zone is properly synced up, you can check what time it is in other parts of the world. Like, say I wanted to look at what time it is in London right now. It's almost 7 a.m. in London. And in Beirut, it's 8 a.m. Almost 9. So yeah, that's how those 24-hour dials on these little travel alarms work. This is actually a Japanese movement made by Tokyo Toke, which means Tokyo Clock in English, Japanese. And this is a Mauta carriage clock. F. Mauta made this carriage clock, and Semka is probably a retailer who bought it from Mauta and put their name on it. There's a lot of different Semkas out there, but this carriage clock has a Mauta W-400 movement in it. And some of these carriage clocks do bim bam striking on 2 bells, but mine just strikes on 1 bell. That there is a Westclox travel alarm. It has a German movement from the General Time Corporation. That whole catastrophe of an ordeal. It's not running at the moment because it needs to be cleaned, and I haven't gotten around to that because I don't know how. And this is a Seth Thomas short drop. Yeah, I moved these around. This used to be where the Elgin is. I'm not going to open that up because that's a mess to deal with. There's a little window here so you can see the pendulum, and you can open this window up. That's how you access the pendulum. This one is probably made in around the late 1800s, just judging by the styling. Also, here's the key that the seller gave me. It's not actually, I don't think, no, that doesn't belong to it. That's a West German clock key. but that's just what I have for it. This is an AMS WAG on the wall. It's an 8-day striking wall clock, and it strikes on a bell. Audio doesn't come through very well on the microphone, so the bell kind of sounds terrible, but oh well. There's not much to say about it. It's just an AMS WAG on the wall, so. This is a Bulova bracket clock. It has a Japanese movement in it, made by Rhythm Watch. You may notice there's no winding holes or anything like that. There's no winding holes on the back either, because this is an electromechanical clock. It uses batteries. 2 D batteries actually, one for the chimes and one for the time. There's a double balance wheel, which is driven by a coil. There's magnets on the balance wheel, and the coil energizes the magnets and causes it to spin very, very fast. So it's actually the balance wheel which powers the clock, not a spring. Well, technically it's the battery that powers it, but you know what I mean. This is a 1930s German/English mantle clock. Strikes on a big cathedral gong. Very, very nice and resonant gong. At first, I thought that this was an Enfield. I thought it had an Enfield movement in it. But after getting some help from more experienced people in this field, they helped me come to the conclusion that the movement is most likely manufactured by Schatz. And I was told the similarities between Schatz and Enfield may be explained because Carl Schatz actually founded Enfield clocks. So that would make sense. The case is in really nice condition. I really like it. Has its original key. Very nice. Right here is a somewhat not nice, very ugly, if I'm going to be quite frank, Seiko Corona Melodia. Seiko Corona Melodias are actually alarm clocks, which don't have bells for alarms, but they have music boxes. This particular one plays Swan Lake. And it plays that on a Sankyo music box. This is a Waterbury tambour mantle clock. It strikes on one rod, and it has a movement that's patented 1898. So it could probably be anywhere between that and, I would guess, 1920. It looks like 1920s. I really like the floral editions where you have your like leaf looking things on the case. I don't know the technical term for woodworking, like what that's specifically called. I'll just call them floral add-ons. Someone's gonna rip their hair out. This is a Seiko 30-day wall clock. Seiko Loris actually made this. It had a sticker on the front glass which said Seiko Loris 30-day. So that's pretty interesting branding shenanigans. I don't know what's going on there. There's a Seiko fanatic who I know of that has told me that this Seiko actually has a rather unusual chime. And yes, that is a moaning ghost in this clock. This is a Centurion 35-day wall clock. It's Korean, and it belonged to my grandparents. They let me have it, for the time being anyway. They couldn't get it working, and I figured out that the key, which I use for this one now because it's not stripped, you might be able to tell from me trying to wind this. Yeah, it's not stripped, it actually grips it. Well, this one somehow managed to strip itself out because it's just the cheapest freaking key that they could have designed, and it wouldn't wind up the clock. So I took it home and used my universal key to wind it all up, and I oiled it as well, and it works fine. These are not uncommon at all. They pop up all the time, especially in America. This is a Chinese bracket clock. It has a movement that's very similar to a clock we'll touch on in a bit. It's in a more traditional bracket clock style. You have spandrels and also the Tempest Fugit logo / motif, whatever, and bracket clock type hands. And it strikes on a really small, tinny sounding coiled gong. It's a 31-day movement as well. This is a Hamilton timbre mantle clock with a Hermle 340-020A. That means it strikes Westminster, of course. Goes for 8 days. Hamilton is a watch company, so it's interesting to see them jump into the market of mantle clocks because they also have bracket clocks that they sell, and they also even have wall clocks, short drop wall clock, like the Howard Miller Shelburnes. This is a Korean 31-day Daejin, or Parliament, bracket clock. It's supposed to strike on 2 chime rods, but, yeah, the shortest one got annihilated in shipping. So it just strikes on 1, unfortunately. The longest. You may notice the case is actually very similar and practically identical to the Chinese bracket clock. And yeah, I can't explain that either. I don't know why this case is a Korean clock and this case is a Chinese clock, but they're identical. That's really strange. This is a Russian submarine clock made by Vostok. Vostok is actually a Russian watch company, and this was made in the USSR while that was still active. That motif there at the front is actually one you find on Vostok watches. It says Komendersky. And the face opens up with the key, and then you can access the regulator, which is at the top here, and the winding key, and of course the hands. Gotta be careful with that center second hand though. We don't talk about the clock in the top right. This is a 30-day Seiko / Seiko Sha wall clock. It is very mid-century modern, and it also has a Japanese styling to it. This is a very typical Japanese styling here. This vertical wood grain, and also this glass here. The patterns in the glass, that's a very usual Japanese design touch. And yeah, they went overboard on the chrome. Chrome dial, chrome hands, chrome numerals, chrome pendulum, chrome key. It was just all about chrome. Not that I'm complaining, I really like the chrome. Okay, so here's 2 cheap-o-matics. The first one on the left is arguably the worst, but the one on the right is not far from better. It's a Westclock Style 9 Big Ben, and it sucks. It has plastic gears, a riveted movement, and it seems like it's completely inaccessible for servicing. So it really sucks. Also, it doesn't keep time at all, no matter how much I regulate it. So, that's too bad. Westclocks used to be a really good company. And right next to the Crap-O-Matics is the unmarked musical cuckoo clock. It's a 30-hour cuckoo clock that plays Edelweiss and Somewhere My Love on a music box, of course. Right down here are my 2 bedside alarm clocks. This is my Westclock's Travel Ben, and right here is the one I wake up with. This is a 5 Rams, or Wu Yang. There you can see their trademark / logo, trademark logo, whatever. Those are 5 Rams, yeah, they don't lie, 5 Rams. I really like this clock styling, it just screams the 60s. The only thing I don't like is that heart-shaped alarm indicator. I could live without that. But other than that, I really like it. And I got it new old stock. So, even bigger plus. I barely even have to have this regulated. I've moved it like a millimeter off center to the slower side, and that's it. This thing is a very accurate timekeeper for what it is. Made in China there, you may be able to faintly see. Alright, and here is another Chinese clock. This is a Chinese wall clock, which shares the movement of the Chinese bracket clock. This, however, is actually marked and branded as Polaris, or in Chinese, Beiji Xing. I'm not good with the Chinese language. I know there's specific tones that you actually have to hit with the way you say the characters, or it's not correct and it can mean something completely different. And I'm trying my best with pronunciations, but I hope I give you a general idea. And if I don't, you can always just type Polaris or 5 rams into Google Translate, and that'll help you out. It's a 31-day wall clock, and it strikes on 2 rods every hour and half hour, of course. Next to it is a Howard Miller Shelburne. No, this is not a Howard Miller regulator. That is not its official name. I do believe this model is dubbed the Shelburne. You also may be able to faintly see that the model number for this clock is 612-533. Another American company that boasts that this entire clock was made in the USA. No, it was not. The case was made in the USA, but the movement is German. From Hermle, it is a 341-020. Fun fact, you can tell by the numbering when you go to order a Hermle which one has a pendulum and which one has a floating balance. Say, for instance, you're going to get a 1050-020. Well, that's the floating balance model because at the end of 1050 there's a 0. So if you wanted a 1050-020 that had a pendulum instead, you would get a 1051-020. 341 pendulum, 340 floating balance. 1050 floating balance, 1051 pendulum. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Now you've heard about everything. So I hope that was informing. I hope I did a good enough job explaining, and if I did not, please tell me which clock you would like to hear more about in the comments, and I will do my best to provide the information that you want to hear. So, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.